Arizona mornings cut sharper than they look. The world is all faded desert gold, and the cold air bites through your jacket, no matter how long you've called this land home. First, Lieutenant Eric Lawson, shoulders hunched against that chill, made his way through the pre-dawn stillness of Camp Redding. It was a Tuesday, nothing special about it, until he reached the barracks door and saw her. A battered German shepherd, ribs stark beneath her matted fur, stood on the edge of the concrete steps. Even from a distance, Eric's breath caught. He knew that face. Sable, his old K-9 partner, the one the Army declared dead in Afghanistan 6 years ago, the one whose memory had haunted every fitful night since. But this dog, she was real, not a ghost, though she looked halfway to one. Sable's body trembled, exhaustion etched in every bone. At her side, barely breathing, was a mangled puppy. Mud-caked, its fur dull with dried blood. The pup was so small Eric almost missed it. Sable pressed her muzzle gently against the little body, then looked up at Eric with an urgency that didn't need words. Eric's heart twisted. The flood of old memories, sand, gunfire, that one last desperate night in Helmand Province, hit him in a flash. Sable's eyes didn't leave him. She didn't whimper, didn't move to run. She simply lay down, nudging the wounded puppy forward, as if making an offering. Eric crouched slowly, careful not to spook her, though his hands shook. He spoke her name, softly. Sable. The name seemed to pull her from another world. Sable's tail flicked, just once, a memory of the dog she'd been. She let him come close, but only so far, her attention always darting back to the puppy, as if daring him to try anything. Eric called in help, his most trusted young corporal, Samantha Sam Perez, and base vet Dr. Molly Carter. Sam hustled across the gravel, breath fogging the air, her boots slapping the ground. "Sir, you said it was urgent." She saw Sable and stopped cold. Her eyes went wide. "No way. That's—" Eric nodded, voice thick. "She came back, and she's got a pup." Dr. Carter arrived seconds later, a stethoscope already dangling from her neck, medical kit in hand. She dropped to her knees beside the puppy, her quick hands gentle and precise. Sable watched every movement. When Dr. Carter reached for the puppy, Sable's lips curled in a silent warning. Just a flash of teeth, nothing more. But when Eric whispered to her again, she relented, eyes never leaving her pup. The vet checked the pup's pulse, then glanced up. "It's bad. She must have dragged him a long way. He's dehydrated, shocky, 2 bad lacerations, possible broken ribs." Eric tried to offer Sable some water, then food. She ignored both, inching forward only when the puppy whimpered, every ounce of her energy focused on her small charge. Sam, normally stoic, was clearly shaken. She knelt beside Sable, murmuring Spanish lullabies she remembered from childhood. Sable's ears flicked at the familiar sounds, but she didn't relax. Not yet. Eric noticed movement beyond the fence. 2 men, strangers, lingered near the base gates, hands in pockets, watching the commotion. It set his nerves on edge. Nothing good ever followed curiosity out here. Sam leaned in, whispering, "You heard what folks are saying, about a miracle dog showing up right when we need it most." Eric shrugged, keeping his eyes on Sable. "I've heard enough rumors for a lifetime." But he knew the way stories spread. Sable's return would ripple out, stirring old ghosts on the base and drawing new eyes where none were wanted. Dr. Carter bundled the puppy in a soft towel, then gave Eric a nod. "We need to get him inside, now." As they moved, Sable rose unsteadily, limping after them, her determination almost painful to watch. Each step looked like it hurt, but she kept going, refusing to let her puppy out of sight. Inside the base clinic, Harsh lights illuminated scars on Sable's side. Old wounds. Some healed ugly, some fresh. She stood by the exam table, nose pressed to the edge, muscles taut as Dr. Carter and Sam began their work on the puppy. For a moment, Eric reached out, resting a trembling hand on Sable's shoulder. She froze, then, slowly, let herself lean into the touch. Just for a second, trust flickered in her eyes, fragile and fierce. It was as if they both remembered the same things. Broken nights on patrol, the silent language only a handler and his dog could know, the way hope sometimes showed up when you'd already given up. As the sun finally broke over the Arizona horizon, the base seemed to hold its breath. Sable, Eric, and the little battered puppy, 3 survivors, bound by the desperate need to believe that even now, maybe, second chances were possible. And outside, in the distance, the 2 strangers turned away from the gates, their faces unreadable in the glare of the morning sun. The clinic at Camp Redding had seen its share of emergencies: shrapnel wounds, heat stroke, the occasional wild rattlesnake bite. But nothing quite like this. As Dr. Molly Carter worked swiftly over the battered puppy, Corporal Sam Perez hovered close by, clutching the towel that still held a trace of Sable's scent. Outside the glass door, Sable sat motionless, eyes fixed on the tiny figure stretched out under the harsh lights, refusing to be comforted, refusing even to blink for fear she might miss the moment her world broke apart. Eric Lawson stood just inside the door, watching the interplay of human and animal desperation. He could feel Sable's anxiety like a static charge in the air, her loyalty absolute, her hope as raw as any wounded Marine he'd ever known. There was something about that silent, unbreakable focus that made even the most seasoned staff fall quiet. No one doubted this was a mother's plea, clear, fierce, uncompromising. "Pressure's dropping," Dr. Carter called, voice steady but urgent. "Sam, I need you. Clamp there and hand me the saline." Sam jumped to help, her face set in a determined mask, but her hands trembled just enough for Eric to notice. Blood welled and pulsed from the puppy's side. Dr. Carter's gloved hands worked fast, suturing flesh, injecting fluids, fighting for every shallow breath. The clinic's machines beeped an uneven rhythm, a life measured in seconds and hope. "Come on, little guy. Stay with us," Sam whispered, as if she could will the puppy back from the brink. She glanced outside at Sable. "She won't move, sir. Not an inch." Eric nodded. "She'll wait as long as it takes." "Reminds me of my mom," Sam said softly. "Didn't matter how bad I messed up. She was always there." Eric looked at her, surprised by the tremor in her voice. He'd never heard Sam talk about family. "You got brothers or sisters?" Sam hesitated, then shook her head. "Had a brother. Lost him in Afghanistan. He was all I had." The confession hung between them, heavier than the desert silence outside. Dr. Carter's focus never wavered. "I'm going to need an extra set of hands for the next part. Eric, can you hold the IV steady?" He did without question. The work grounded him, drew him away from old ghosts and into this moment. One where loss wasn't inevitable, where maybe, just maybe, something broken could be made whole again. Minutes dragged into an hour, then longer. Sable didn't move. Marines from all over the base began to gather quietly in the corridor, drawn by word of mouth. Some left scraps of beef jerky and dog biscuits on the floor by the door. Others, remembering Sable from deployments long ago, placed handwritten notes, "Thank you for saving us," beside the growing pile. A grizzled sergeant, his leg braced in a steel frame, paused beside Eric. "That's the same dog from Helmand, ain't it? I'll never forget. She sniffed out that tripwire before we lost half the squad." Eric nodded, unable to speak. He remembered that day too. Dust, fear, then Sable's sudden lunge that changed everything. Inside the clinic, the puppy's breathing steadied, then faltered. Sam gripped Dr. Carter's wrist. "Buddy, that's his name. You gotta make it, buddy, you hear me?" As if sensing the weight of the moment, Sable gave a gentle wag at the name, the tip of her tail brushing the tile. The base was never truly quiet, but for those tense hours, a hush fell over Camp Redding. No one dared disturb the vigil outside the clinic. Even Major Alden, the commanding officer, stopped by, taking in the scene with tired eyes. "Heard you found yourself a miracle, Lawson," Alden said. "Not sure if it's a miracle or a curse, sir," Eric replied. "Miracles and curses come hand in hand," Alden said, then slipped away, leaving only the scent of coffee and the clink of his medals. Just before dawn, Dr. Carter leaned back with a sigh. "He's stable. He's not out of the woods, but he's got a shot." Sam exhaled, tears sliding unchecked down her cheeks. She pressed her hand to Buddy's tiny chest, feeling the faint thump of his heart. "Go tell her," Dr. Carter said gently. Eric stepped outside, squatting down beside Sable. "He made it. He's not safe yet, but he's alive." Sable stared at him, unblinking. Then, with a trembling sigh, she leaned forward and pressed her head into his chest. For the first time since she'd arrived, she let herself rest, just for a moment, trusting him to watch over her pup. The Marines drifted away, leaving their gifts behind, a testament to the memories Sable had given them, and the hope she brought with her return. But not everyone on base was a friend. As Eric scanned the perimeter, he caught sight of the same two civilians from before. This time, one raised a pair of binoculars, tracking every movement around the clinic. Sam saw them too. "You think they're after Sable?" Eric's jaw tightened. "They're not here for the scenery, that's for sure." Inside, Sable watched through the glass as Dr. Carter and Sam settled Buddy in a nest of warm blankets. She made no sound, but her eyes never left him, not even when Eric, Sam, and Dr. Carter finally sank into exhaustion. For now, mother and puppy had earned another sunrise. But as the sky shifted from indigo to gold, it was clear the peace was fragile, and Sable's long journey was far from over. The sun rose with a vengeance over Camp Redding, washing the base in a harsh, white heat that pressed down on everyone and everything. In the small veterinary clinic, the lights never dimmed and the sense of tension barely faded. Sable's vigil by Buddy's side became legend in less than a day. She refused to eat, refused to drink, refused to rest for longer than a minute. Her eyes locked on her fragile, recovering pup, as if sheer willpower could keep him alive. Marines passing by stopped to watch, whispering stories of the old days, memories flaring up in bits and pieces. The ambush in Musakala, the night patrol where Sable sniffed out a roadside bomb with seconds to spare, her uncanny instinct for danger and loyalty that ran deeper than bone. Inside the clinic, Dr. Molly Carter quietly prepped her scanner, her jaw set in concentration. She waited until Sable's breathing slowed, and the old dog allowed herself a moment away from Buddy, then approached with slow, careful steps. "Easy, girl," she murmured, "just checking something." The microchip reader chirped to life as she passed it over Sable's shoulder. There was a faint beep, and a series of numbers appeared on the display. Dr. Carter's brow furrowed. "Eric, you want to see this?" Eric Lawson stepped closer, the familiar nervousness in his gut. "What's up?" Dr. Carter handed him the scanner. "She's got a chip. It's definitely Sable. Her old serial number registered to you, Afghanistan deployment. But look here." She turned the screen. The file header read, "Project Sentinel, Classified History." Eric felt something cold settle in his chest. Project Sentinel. The name he hadn't heard in years. It brought back flashes, midnight briefings, men in suits, veiled talk about experimental protocols and canine resilience. Sable had always been more than a regular dog, but whatever secrets she carried, they had followed her home. Sam, who had slipped into the room, caught the look on Eric's face. What does that mean? He hesitated. It means we're not the only ones who want to know why she's still alive. Buddy's recovery was slow, but there was progress. Dr. Carter checked his vitals every hour, and Sam took over feeding, coaxing him to swallow chicken broth, piece by tiny piece. Every time Buddy whimpered, Sable nuzzled him, her nose tracing over his wounds, breathing in reassurance. For the first time, Eric watched the connection between them, the fierce, unyielding love of a mother who had already lost too much. When Buddy slept, Sable sometimes limped the perimeter of the exam room, her nose twitching at every new scent, every unfamiliar shadow. Each time a door opened, she would freeze, ready to defend her pup with the last of her strength. One afternoon, as Sam cleaned out the old storage room to make space for supplies, she found a battered cardboard box under a pile of camouflage blankets. She tugged it free, dust motes swirling in the sunbeams from the window. "Hey, Doc, check this out," she called. Dr. Carter glanced over. "What did you find?" Sam opened the box, revealing a collection of faded photographs, handwritten notes, and a stack of deployment rosters. She thumbed through the pictures, shots of young Marines posing with Sable in muddy uniforms, grinning at the camera, Sable's head always held high. In one, Eric knelt beside her, his arms slung around her shoulders. Both younger, faces unlined by grief. Sam handed the photo to Eric when he walked in. He stared at it for a long time, the memory washing over him. "We were just kids," he said quietly. "Yeah, but you had her," Sam said. Eric looked away, blinking hard. "Sometimes, having her was the only thing that got me through." Outside the clinic, the whispers started to spread. At first it was just the Marines who remembered Sable's heroics, but soon rumors flew farther. Veterans in town, local journalists sniffing for a story, and, more troubling, government officials quietly making calls to the base command. One morning, as Eric crossed the parking lot to grab breakfast, a reporter intercepted him at the gate, her notebook at the ready. "Lieutenant Lawson, is it true your old partner is back from the dead?" He scowled, refusing to take the bait. "No comment." She smiled, all sharp edges. "People love a good miracle, Lieutenant. Especially the kind the government can't explain." Eric pushed past her, unease growing. He'd seen what happened when a story got bigger than the people in it. Sable wasn't just his dog anymore. She was becoming a symbol, and symbols never stayed safe for long. Back in the clinic, Dr. Carter pulled Eric aside, her voice low. "There's something else. The Pentagon requested Sable's medical file, Buddy's too, official channels." Eric's hands balled into fists. "You think they want to take them?" "I think someone wants to know how she survived, and they'll want to control the story." Eric looked over at Sable, curled protectively around Buddy, her ears flicking every time someone new entered the room. She was tired, scarred, but undefeated. Sam, sensing his tension, touched his arm. "We'll fight for her, sir, whatever it takes." The sun set over Camp Redding, painting the sky in molten gold and purple. In the clinic, Sable finally allowed herself to close her eyes, just for a minute, only after Buddy settled into a deep, steady sleep. Eric sat beside them, memory and fear wrestling inside him. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only that he wouldn't lose Sable again, not without a fight. And somewhere outside the gates, as dusk bled into night, Those same unfamiliar faces lingered in the shadows, their intentions hidden, waiting for the right moment to act. The tension around Camp Redding simmered like the relentless Arizona sun, each hour bringing a new layer of uncertainty. It wasn't just the base that felt it. Sable's story was leaking past the chain-link fences, filtering through the ranks and bleeding into the wider world. Where once the old dog and her battered puppy were miracles, now they'd become subjects of scrutiny, targets for paperwork, and pawns in a game that had very little to do with loyalty or love. Major Robert Bob Alden, the commanding officer, strode through the corridors with the weight of responsibility etched deep on his face. Eric Lawson met him outside the clinic, where Sable still guarded the recovery room like a silent sentinel, never more than a few feet from Buddy. "Lawson, I've got a situation," Alden said, voice low but urgent. "We're getting calls from the Pentagon, from research labs, from folks with PhDs and clearance levels higher than mine. They want Sable and the pup. They say it's for study." Eric tensed. "With all due respect, sir, that dog isn't a science experiment. She's family." Alden's eyes softened a fraction, but he shook his head. "My hands are tied. Regulations are clear. Non-service animals aren't allowed on base. And now the researchers are lobbying hard. They want to know how a dog presumed dead for 6 years comes limping home with a half-dead pup. They want answers, and they want control." Inside the clinic, Sam and Dr. Carter fought a different battle. The base had always been their home, but now it felt like a siege. Every time the phone rang, it was another bureaucrat or outsider pushing for information. Emails poured in, requests for blood samples, behavioral tests, even a demand for full custody of subjects Sable and Buddy, for immediate transfer to a federal facility. Dr. Carter read the latest missive, her jaw clenched tight. "They're not even pretending this is about the dog's welfare. They want data, nothing more." Sam, kneeling beside Buddy, stroked his fur. "He's not a number. And Sable, she saved more lives than most of those people ever will." The Marines on base rallied quietly. Someone hung a hand-painted sign outside the clinic. "Heroes don't belong in cages." Others started a petition, signatures appearing overnight. Treats and notes piled up, the base's way of saying, "These dogs are ours," but pressure mounted. One afternoon, a black SUV with government plates appeared at the main gate. 2 men in dark suits met with Major Alden in his office, doors closed tight. Word traveled fast. By dinner time, everyone on base knew the story. Sable's fate and Buddy's hung in the balance. That evening, Eric, Sam, and Dr. Carter gathered in the break room, a battle plan spread across the scarred table. "They're going to take them if we don't fight back," Sam said, her voice shaking with frustration. Eric stared at the deployment roster, lost in thought. "If Buddy could just show them something, prove he's special, maybe they'll back down." Dr. Carter frowned. "He's still so weak. We can't push him too hard." Sam's eyes flashed. "What if we show them what Sable means to this base, what she means to all of us?" Eric shook his head. "They don't care about loyalty. They care about results." As night fell, an official envelope arrived, hand-delivered by a young officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Eric opened it with grim dread. The words stung like a slap. "Sable and Buddy will be surrendered to federal custody within 24 hours, unless Buddy demonstrates exceptional recovery. Failure to comply will result in disciplinary action." The message was clear. They had 1 day to save the dogs, or risk losing everything. The weight of the deadline pressed on Eric as he paced the clinic. Sable sensed it too, her anxiety rising, her movements restless. She growled softly every time someone new entered, even if it was just a medic or a familiar Marine. Buddy, still fragile but growing stronger, whimpered whenever Sable left his side for more than a moment. Outside, the base felt like a powder keg. Marines swapped stories about Sable at chow, arguing heatedly about the injustice. Some called their families, desperate for advice or comfort. At midnight, Sam found Eric staring out at the empty parking lot, the distant lights of the town barely visible beyond the wire. "I lost my brother to war," she said quietly. "I'm not losing them to paperwork." Eric didn't answer for a long time. Then he nodded, resolve hardening in his eyes. "Tomorrow we fight for them, whatever it takes." That night, sleep didn't come easy for anyone. Dr. Carter triple-checked Buddy's IVs and oxygen. Sam lay awake, her mind spinning with plans and what-ifs. Eric sat in the dark with Sable, hand resting on her back, both of them tense and watchful. A storm was coming, one made not of bullets but of signatures and protocols, and men who'd never bled for anyone but themselves. Sable and Buddy's fate hung on the thinnest of threads. Yet, in that fragile, anxious silence, hope flickered, a stubborn, pulsing ember that refused to die. Tomorrow would come, and when it did, no one would say they hadn't tried. The air on base the next morning was sharp and heavy, thick with dread and desperate hope. Word had spread. Today was the day. Eric Lawson barely slept, replaying every moment of the last 48 hours. Every time he'd stared down an impossible situation and managed to pull something out of nothing. But this, right now, felt like the hardest test of all, not just for him, but for everyone who'd ever put their faith in something fragile and good. Dawn found the veterinary clinic already buzzing. Marines and staff gathered in tight knots outside, their faces etched with worry, as if sheer presence could keep disaster at bay. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed over the little room where Buddy lay swaddled in blankets, Sable never leaving his side. Dr. Carter was there early, reviewing the official letter one more time. Her lips pressed thin in frustration. Exceptional recovery, that's what they want. Some miracle. Buddy standing, walking, like nothing ever happened. Sam hovered by Buddy's crate, her hand resting on the puppy's head. He's barely strong enough to sit up. "We don't have a choice," Eric said quietly. "They'll take him, both of them, unless he can show them something." Outside, a group of Marines lingered by the clinic's door. A few left small tokens, dog tags, a faded patch from an old uniform, a silver bracelet. These weren't just gestures. They were reminders of every life Sable had helped save. For many, this wasn't just about a dog or a puppy. It was about keeping the family you found, even when the world tried to take it away. By mid-morning, Major Alden arrived, flanked by a pair of government observers, cold, efficient men in pressed suits, their eyes never straying far from the clipboard and camera in their hands. The tension in the room was a living thing. "We're here to observe the test," one of the men said. "If the puppy demonstrates full mobility and basic response, the request for transfer will be reconsidered. Otherwise, we take custody by 1400 hours. Eric could barely hide his disgust. "He's not a lab rat." Major Alden raised a warning brow. "Let's just get through this, Lieutenant." The observers set up their camera, adjusting the lens to capture every angle. Marines watched from the doorway, holding their breath as if a single sound could tip the balance. Dr. Carter prepared Buddy, gently lifting the tiny puppy from his nest of blankets. He whimpered weakly, but Sable was there, licking his ear, her tail wagging in slow, anxious arcs. Sam knelt in front of Buddy, cooing encouragements. "You can do this, little guy. You're tougher than all of us. Eric crouched at eye level with Sable. He needs you, girl, just like you always needed him. Sable seemed to understand. She nosed Buddy's side, then nudged him forward with all the gentleness she could muster. Buddy's legs shook as he tried to stand. His first attempt failed. He slumped back onto his haunches, eyes wide with pain and confusion. The observers scribbled something on their clipboards, unmoved. Sam's voice broke through the silence. "Come on, Buddy. You're not alone. We're all here." As if her words lit a fire, Sable stepped in front of Buddy, lowering her head to his level. She nudged him again, this time more firmly. It was a silent command, the kind that had saved lives in battlefields far away. Buddy whimpered, then pushed up, back legs wobbling, front paws planted. Every Marine in the room tensed, silent prayers on their lips. He wobbled, almost toppled. Then Sable pressed her shoulder against his side, lending just enough support. Buddy took one unsteady step, then another. The whole room seemed to lean forward, willing him on. Sable moved with him, a living crutch, every instinct focused on keeping him upright. The observers' cameras clicked. Buddy, shaking, made it halfway across the floor. Then, with a final burst of effort, he stumbled the last 2 steps into Sable's waiting embrace. The room erupted. Not with cheers, but with something deeper, a collective, relieved exhale. Sam's eyes filled with tears. He did it. Oh God, he did it. Even Dr. Carter, who'd seen her share of miracles and heartbreak, was blinking hard. Major Alden stepped forward, clearing his throat. He looked from Sable to Buddy, then at the Marines who crowded the door. For a long moment he said nothing. The silence filled only by the sound of Buddy panting and Sable licking his face. Finally, Alden faced the government observers. "You got what you came for. These dogs stay with us. This is their home." The men in suits exchanged a look, clearly not pleased, but the letter of the order had been fulfilled. One of them gave a grudging nod. "For now, but we reserve the right to reevaluate at any time." Alden nodded curtly. "Noted. But you saw it. You can't take away what they've given us." The government men gathered their things and left, the tension draining from the room the instant the door closed behind them. Word spread fast. Marines whooped and hollered in the hallways, clapping each other on the back. Someone started a slow, steady chant. "Sable, Buddy! Sable, Buddy!" And before long, the whole base seemed to join in. For a brief, shining moment, it felt like nothing was impossible. Outside, as the late morning sun rose high and hot, Eric found a quiet spot beneath the old flagpole. He crouched beside Sable, running a hand down her battered back. "You did it, girl," he whispered. "You saved him. You saved all of us." Sable pressed her head against his chest, eyes closing in trust and relief. Nearby, Buddy curled up, breathing easy at last. Neither Eric nor the others knew what would happen tomorrow, if more tests or threats would come. But in that fragile peace, with hope restored, they found what they'd almost lost, the belief that love, loyalty, and second chances could still win, even against the odds. Weeks slipped by at Camp Redding, each day a stitch pulling together wounds, some visible, some buried deep. The base's rhythm subtly shifted. The Marines still trained, still drilled, still marched in the blistering Arizona heat. But now, 2 unlikely mascots patrolled their lives. Sable and Buddy became part of the morning roll call. Sable dignified and limping but unbowed. Buddy still small but growing stronger by the hour, padding beside her like a shadow, intent on becoming his own son. On a clear Monday, Sable limped down the barracks hallway, tail swaying gently as she inspected every room. Marines called out greetings. "Morning, Sable!" "Hey there, hero!" And always, Buddy answered with a clumsy bark. The pair brightened the most jaded hearts. Tough men and women, hardened by war and disappointment, found themselves crouching down to scratch Buddy's ears or hand Sable a bit of leftover steak from their rations. Some even left notes, words they could never say out loud to another person. Thank you for bringing her back. You saved my life. I owe you. In the evenings, a small crowd gathered by the rec center, sharing stories that had lain dormant for years. One night, Sergeant Willis, a Marine with haunted eyes and a limp that mirrored Sable's, spoke for the first time about Helmand. He recounted how Sable had dragged him from the blast zone, how her teeth had found the strap of his flak vest and wouldn't let go until he was clear of danger. Someone else shared a tale of Sable's uncanny sense for hidden explosives, her steadfast refusal to leave a comrade behind. These weren't just war stories anymore. They were stories of healing, told in the warm glow of Buddy's playfulness and Sable's steady gaze. Dr. Molly Carter, exhausted but content, watched the transformation with quiet satisfaction. Her clinic was busier than ever, not because of emergencies, but because Marines stopped by just to see Sable and Buddy. Animal-assisted therapy, she joked with Eric one afternoon, though there was a quiver of emotion behind her smile. Didn't think we'd invent it by accident. Eric grinned. Maybe it's what we all needed, a reminder that there's more to life than orders and outcomes. Still, the shadow of outside interest lingered. Dr. Carter got a call from an old university colleague, Dr. Harris. The conversation was casual at first, catching up on old times and research projects. But then his tone changed. "Molly, listen," he said, voice lowered. Words going around. Some civilian research teams, big grants, serious government contracts, are asking about that dog, Sable. They want to know if you're willing to collaborate. Dr. Carter's jaw tightened. She's not a specimen, Harris. She's family. I get it, he replied, but people are pushing. You might want to watch your back. That night, Dr. Carter brought it up with Eric and Sam in the clinic. We're not out of the woods. If Buddy and Sable stay healthy, we need to be ready for more visitors. People who don't see them the way we do. Sam, sitting cross-legged on the floor with Buddy curled up in her lap, nodded. Let them come. We'll show them what loyalty looks like. Eric watched Sable, now stretched out in the patch of sun that always found her at midday, her eyes finally closing in real sleep. We'll be ready. They've got politics. We've got family. The subtle healing on base radiated outward. Eric, who'd kept his pain locked away, found himself at the peer support group Sam recommended. The meetings were awkward at first, a half-circle of folding chairs in the chow hall, the air thick with silence and unspoken grief. But Sam's gentle encouragement and willingness to share about her brother's death began to thaw even the hardest edges. Loss never leaves you, Sam said one night, voice steady but soft. But it doesn't get to take everything either. We can find a way through it, together. Eric surprised himself by speaking up. Sable was my anchor over there. When I lost her, I thought I'd lost my last reason to care. But she came back, and she brought hope with her. That hope, however fragile, became contagious. Other Marines started bringing their own stories, and soon, laughter sometimes replaced the awkward silences. Someone suggested a barbecue, and Buddy became the unofficial judge of who grilled the best ribs, his tale the final verdict. As the days grew longer and the Arizona sky burned clear, Sable's limp lessened. She still bore scars, but she moved with more confidence, her steps lightened by Buddy's relentless energy. Buddy grew curious, nosing into every corner of the base, chasing sunbeams, chewing the laces off boots. He was still healing, but his appetite for life outpaced his wounds. One afternoon, Sable found herself dozing in the sun outside the officers' mess. Buddy curled against her side. Eric sat on the steps, looking out at the parade ground, the flag snapping high above. "You know, girl, I think you saved more than just Buddy," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "I think you saved me, too." Sable's eyes flicked open, and for a moment, the old dog seemed to smile. Yet the outside world crept closer. Dr. Carter, checking her email late one night, found another message flagged urgent, a formal request from a civilian research group asking to visit Camp Redding and evaluate the animals for potential study. She forwarded it to Eric and Sam. Her message brief but clear. "They're not giving up. Stay alert." Eric replied in the early hours, his words simple. "They'll have to go through all of us. Still, for now, the base thrived in the warmth of a second chance. Buddy and Sable, no longer just survivors, were living proof that healing was possible. Not just for them, but for everyone willing to hope again. Pressure grew, invisible but undeniable, as the weeks rolled on. The research teams, those polite voices from government labs, their letters all legalese and veiled threats, turned up the heat. They weren't satisfied with updates or polite refusals. Soon the Pentagon itself began sending more pointed inquiries, asking for reports, independent evaluations, and even floated the possibility of federal marshals arriving to escort the dogs into protective custody for national interest. For Sam Perez, that was the last straw. "They think they can just show up and take them?" she said, voice hot with anger as she paced the barracks. "Not a chance. Not on my watch." Eric, who'd grown used to keeping a cool head in firefights, now found his patience tested in new ways. "This isn't Afghanistan, but it feels just as risky," he muttered to Dr. Carter over chow. "At least over there, you knew where the bullets were coming from." Dr. Carter only nodded, her phone buzzing constantly with interview requests from local and national news. "It's a story now, Eric. Not just a miracle dog and a puppy. Now it's about what happens when people refuse to let go of hope." That was when Sam had her idea. "If they want to see what Sable and Buddy mean to us, let's show them. All of them. The Pentagon, the town, everyone." She went straight to Major Alden. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to organize a petition and an open day for the community. Let the world meet Sable and Buddy. If people see them for who they are, not just numbers in a report, maybe the pressure will shift." Alden looked at her for a long moment, weighing the risks. "Do it, Perez. But make sure you have help. This has to be more than a Marine thing. Bring in the town. Show them what these dogs mean, to all of us." Within days, the petition circulated like wildfire. Marines signed first, then the cooks and maintenance staff, then townsfolk who remembered Sable's exploits from years before. Even the mayor showed up at the base gate, pen in hand. Veterans from every branch added their names, leaving notes like, "She saved my brother in Helmand," and "Buddy gives me hope for my grandson." Sam, Eric, and Dr. Carter worked late into the night at a folding table in the mess hall, sorting signatures and answering calls from news outlets. "This is bigger than us now," Sam said, her eyes shining with tired pride. "It's about fighting for what's right, not just for Sable and Buddy, but for every second chance that's ever been given." Major Alden, inspired by the momentum, took it a step further. He wrote a personal letter to Congress, something he hadn't done in all his years of command. In the letter, he detailed Sable's heroism, Buddy's improbable survival, and the way these two had become the heart of Camp Redding. "I urge you to recognize Sable and Buddy as honorary veterans," he wrote, "and allow them to remain here among the family that needs them most." He read the letter aloud at morning roll call, his usually gruff voice carrying a rare tremor. For a moment, every Marine stood straighter. Even Sable, seated at his feet, seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, pressing against Buddy as if to keep him safe. The day of the open event dawned bright and cloudless, the Arizona sun painting the base in gold. Flags snapped crisply on every pole. The gates were thrown open to the public, and a steady stream of cars and trucks poured in. Children rushed to meet Buddy, who now bounded around on sturdy legs, licking faces and tugging at sleeves. Sable, regal and calm, let toddlers press their hands into her fur, her old eyes gentle. Local reporters set up cameras at the main entrance. Volunteers guided visitors to tables covered in memorabilia, photos of Sable with squads overseas, medals she'd received, letters of thanks from families she'd helped save. Veterans in wheelchairs shared stories of her bravery, while Marines lined up to take selfies with Buddy and Sable. Sam gave a short speech beneath the big oak by the parade ground, her voice clear and passionate. They say one dog can't change the world, but if you ask anyone here, Sable and Buddy have already changed ours. We stand with them because they always stood with us. The crowd erupted in applause, and a chant began. Soft at first, then growing louder, a chorus of voices young and old. Sable and Buddy! Sable and Buddy! Eric was last to speak. He stepped forward, hands in his pockets, eyes searching the horizon. I lost a lot over there, he said, his voice raw. But I never lost faith in loyalty or love. Sable taught me that you don't give up. Not on your team, not on your family, not even on yourself. Buddy reminds us every day that healing isn't just possible. It's worth fighting for. So if the world wants to take them from us, they'll have to get through all of us first. He knelt beside Sable, pressing his forehead to hers, Buddy wagging so hard his tail thudded against the grass. That night, as the stars came out and the crowds finally faded, Eric, Sam, and Dr. Carter sat together on the clinic steps, silent but smiling. The base was changed, stronger, more. Within days of the open day, the winds shifted at Camp Redding. News clips from the event went viral, footage of Sable standing proud, Buddy bounding through a ring of laughing children, interviews with Marines and veterans testifying to the loyalty and love these dogs inspired. Across the country, people were talking about the miracle at Camp Redding, the dog who came back from the dead and her indomitable puppy. Letters poured in from every corner. School children scribbled thank you notes. Gold Star families sent photos of loved ones saved by canine heroes. Even politicians, usually distant and disinterested, took notice. The base's petition had racked up thousands of signatures by now, their meaning amplified by the heartfelt stories attached. It was Congress's turn to respond. In a rare unanimous vote, they passed a resolution. Sable and Buddy would be officially recognized as honorary service members, allowed to remain at Camp Redding as living symbols of loyalty, courage, and second chances. Major Alden received the news from the Pentagon directly. He called an emergency formation at dusk, the desert air shimmering with anticipation. Marines stood at attention on the parade ground. The flag was lowered and raised again in Sable's honor. The entire base and half the town gathered to witness the unveiling of a new plaque outside the clinic, its bronze surface catching the last orange rays of the sun. It read, Sable's Watch, in honor of loyalty and second chances. Eric stood beside Sable, his hand resting gently on her head. Buddy pressed against his leg. The applause was thunderous, echoing off the barracks and rolling out across the desert like a promise. Dr. Carter blinked back tears as she read the inscription aloud. Sam, usually stoic, grinned and lifted Buddy into the air, prompting a fresh wave of cheers. But the true tribute wasn't just in ceremonies or speeches. It lived in the small moments that followed. Marines finding Sable waiting outside the mess at breakfast, Buddy chasing butterflies between the Humvees, the way even the toughest sergeant paused to offer a quiet word or a gentle pat. The dogs had become the soul of the base, a reminder that family wasn't always what you were born into, but what you fought to keep. Media attention was relentless, but now it was an armor rather than a threat. Reporters came, but they left with stories of healing, resilience, and hope. Dr. Carter published an article in a national magazine, blending her medical expertise with the raw, real stories she'd witnessed at Camp Redding. Her headline, "Healing Unleashed: What Dogs Teach Us About Surviving Trauma." Her words struck a chord, sparking conversations among psychologists, veterans, and animal advocates nationwide. Eric, his own wounds finally beginning to close, found new purpose in the attention. Inspired by the bond between Sable and Buddy, he started a pilot program pairing rescue dogs with veterans on base, calling it Heroes and Hounds. At first, the idea met with some skepticism. Not every Marine was ready to trust again. Not every rescue dog was as extraordinary as Sable. But gradually, as word spread and success stories multiplied, the program grew. Veterans with nightmares and old scars found solace in the companionship of a dog who simply listened, loved, and stood by them without judgment. One night, the base hosted a cookout beneath the wide Arizona sky. Fireflies danced above the grass as Marines laughed around the fire. Sable, ever watchful, circled the gathering, nuzzling anyone who seemed withdrawn. Buddy played tug-of-war with a rope, his clumsy puppy joy contagious. Eric watched, a smile tugging at his lips for the first time in years. He saw men and women who had once been islands now talking, sharing, letting their guard down. Major Alden took the stage, voice booming over the crowd. Some say heroes come in uniforms. Some say they come on 4 legs. Tonight we honor both. Let Sable's watch remind us. No one heals alone. We fight for each other. We stand together. And sometimes, hope comes back to us when we need it most. The applause was overwhelming, reverberating under the stars, and as the night drew on, Dr. Carter pulled Eric aside. Your idea, Heroes and Hounds, it's working. I haven't seen so many smiles here in years. Eric nodded. I think we all just needed permission to hope again. Sam wandered over, Buddy in her arms. She grinned. He's already training the next batch. Found him counseling 3 new recruits behind the barracks. You should have seen it. One of them was crying, and Buddy just sat with him until he stopped. They stood in companionable silence, watching Sable settle at the foot of the flagpole, her gaze fixed on the horizon, as if daring the world to challenge her again. Word of Camp Redding's transformation reached far beyond the wire. Local shelters offered to send dogs. Therapy groups volunteered their services, and nearby townsfolk signed up to support Heroes and Hounds. It was as if Sable's return had sparked a movement, one where broken people and broken animals found each other, and in doing so, made something whole. Even the most jaded among them couldn't deny the change. The old pain was still there. Eric knew it would never vanish completely, but now it was softened, tempered by the knowledge that healing was possible, that second chances sometimes walked on 4 legs and wagged their tails. As midnight settled on Camp Redding, Eric paused by the new plaque, Sable at his side, Buddy dozing at his feet. The stars seemed closer than ever. He whispered, "Thank you, girl, for everything." Sable leaned against him, and for that moment, all was right in the world. The nights on Camp Redding grew cooler as autumn crept into the Arizona desert, But inside the base, warmth seemed to settle where it mattered most. The crisis had passed, at least for now, and in its wake, the routines of daily life felt richer. Each sunrise carrying the quiet comfort of belonging and a lesson learned in the hardest way. For Eric Lawson, the transformation was more than surface deep. The scars he carried, hidden and otherwise, had shaped his life for years, but Sable's return had forced him to face the hardest truth. Survival was more than just making it through the day. Sometimes it meant opening up, risking trust, and letting hope in, even when it felt impossible. One evening, after roll call, Eric lingered on the parade ground as the sky burned gold and purple. Sable trotted beside him, Buddy just behind, tail high and happy. Eric found himself remembering the early days, how empty his life had felt after the war, how easy it had been to believe that loss was his only future. But now, as he watched Sable and Buddy play in the dust, he realized that true survival wasn't about shutting the world out, but letting it back in, one fragile step at a time. It was a lesson he shared quietly, first in the peer support group Sam had helped him join, and then more openly as Heroes and Hounds took off. "I thought strength was about carrying your pain alone," he told a circle of Marines one night, the chairs arranged in a loose semicircle in the chow hall. "But sometimes, strength means asking for help. Sometimes, it's risking love again, letting people or even dogs get close." The words felt strange leaving his mouth, but they landed. Heads nodded, and silence settled in. The kind of silence that comes when people are thinking, truly listening. Sam, for her part, found her own healing woven into Sable and Buddy's story. She'd lost her brother to a roadside bomb, and for years her grief had been a private wound, barely spoken of even among friends. But Sable's devotion to Buddy, the stubborn hope that refused to die, stirred something in her. One afternoon, after a long shift in the clinic, she sat in her bunk with a notebook and pen. She wrote a letter to her brother, the first in years, telling him about Sable, about Buddy, about how the dogs had taught her to hope again. "I thought I'd never feel whole," she wrote, her handwriting shaky but determined. "But I do now, even with the pain. I see you in every second chance I give, in every dog I help heal, in every Marine I talk off the ledge. I hope you'd be proud." Dr. Carter, inspired by the outpouring of stories and the impact of her article, started hosting group sessions for Marines, veterans, and even local townspeople. The focus was simple: talk about how healing can come from unexpected places, and how animals, especially ones like Sable and Buddy, often lead the way. One evening, the group filled the entire clinic waiting room. People shared stories of dogs that had saved them, of moments when a wet nose or a wagging tail made the unbearable feel survivable. For some, it was the first time they'd spoken about their pain in public. The tears and laughter mixed, each emotion respected and understood. Eric found himself more comfortable with these conversations than he'd ever imagined. He began to see his leadership in a new light. Not just as a Marine, but as someone capable of helping others heal. His confidence grew as he mentored younger veterans, encouraging them to join the Heroes and Hounds program, or simply to sit in the circle and listen. He also recognized the change in himself. He laughed more easily, slept better, and found that the world seemed less threatening, more forgiving. Some nights, he'd sit on his bunk and stare at old photos, of Sable as a puppy, of his lost squad, of the dusty roads in Helmand, and feel gratitude rather than grief. The town around Camp Redding changed too. Word of the base's transformation spread, and soon locals dropped by with treats and supplies for the dogs, or simply to share their own stories of hope. A retired teacher brought cookies for the Marines every week. saying Sable had reminded her that miracles come to those who fight for them. Families who'd lost loved ones in service found solace in visiting the base, feeling a sense of connection and belonging that had been missing since the funeral parades and folded flags. Sam's letter to her brother became something of a legend, passed quietly among the Marines, sometimes read aloud in the barracks on lonely nights. It reminded everyone that family was as much chosen as inherited, and that true loyalty wasn't written in blood, but in the choices made every day, to care, to fight, to hope. On a brisk Saturday, the town held a small ceremony to honor the base and its new guardians. Kids played with Buddy in the grass, Sable rested at Eric's feet, and Dr. Carter read a poem about healing. For a moment, all the divisions, civilian and military, past and present, loss and renewal, seemed to fade. That evening, as the stars emerged over Camp Redding, Eric sat with Sam, Dr. Carter, and Major Alden outside the clinic, Sable's head in his lap, Buddy snoring nearby. They talked quietly about the future, about growing heroes and hounds, about reaching more veterans, about keeping hope alive even when it seemed the world was determined to crush it. Eric looked around at his friends, at the family he'd chosen and the wounds they'd all survived, and knew, finally, what Sable had brought back from the desert. Not just herself, not just a battered puppy, but the lesson that courage was found not only on the battlefield, but in the daily act of holding on to hope. Life at Camp Redding was never truly easy, but in the months after Sable and Buddy became honorary service members, something shifted permanently. The air felt lighter, the routines less monotonous, the wounds, old and new, more likely to heal. It was as if the dog's courage had seeped into the very soil, planting seeds that would keep on growing long after the applause faded and the reporters left for the next miracle story. But perhaps the greatest sign of all was how the future had become something to look forward to, rather than something to dread. The Heroes and Hounds program flourished beyond anyone's expectations. What began as Eric's tentative idea turned into a signature project for the base, and soon for the surrounding region. Veterans from across Arizona, and eventually other states, traveled to Camp Redding for a chance to meet Sable and Buddy, to share their stories, and to be paired with rescue dogs of their own. Each match was more than just an adoption. It was a second chance. There were former Marines haunted by nightmares, soldiers struggling to adjust to civilian life, young recruits carrying invisible wounds. But week after week, they walked away a little less alone, a little more whole, with a four-legged companion at their side and hope flickering in their eyes. Eric, Sam, Dr. Carter, and Major Alden worked as a seamless team. They held monthly gatherings beneath the flagpole, where Sable and Buddy always took their place at the front, sitting tall and proud. New arrivals to the program were greeted by wagging tails and warm, unspoken acceptance. "No judgment here," Sam would say with a wry smile, introducing the newest members. "If you're looking for family, you've found it." Each meeting began the same way. A Marine or veteran would step forward, sometimes hesitant, sometimes on the verge of tears, and tell their story, not just of loss, but of resilience. Sometimes the words faltered, but the dogs filled in the silences. Sable leaning against a trembling hand, Buddy flopping into a lap with all the irrepressible joy only a puppy can muster. Even the toughest men and women eventually melted, the laughter growing a little louder each time. The Heroes and Hounds wall in the clinic filled up with photographs and thank you notes. Dogs lying across sleeping bags, men smiling for the first time in years, kids hugging new best friends. Dr. Carter kept a record of each story, and sometimes, late at night, she'd read the letters and weep quietly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had begun with a battered German shepherd and a dying puppy on a cold morning. Sable's watch continued in quiet ways. Marines and veterans reported finding fresh paw prints by the flagpole at dawn, no matter the weather. Buddy, grown strong and clever, patrolled the base with endless curiosity, always making sure no one was left out. It became tradition to leave treats or small notes at the foot of the new plaque, as if to say, "We're still here. We remember." Local schools made field trips to Camp Redding, and children listened wide-eyed as Eric, Sam, or Dr. Carter shared the story of Sable and Buddy, of loyalty that refused to die, of second chances that became lifelines. Eric's own life blossomed in the warmth of newfound purpose. He was no longer just a Marine haunted by what he'd lost. He was a mentor, a friend, a leader who'd learned the difference between surviving and truly living. Sam, too, grew into her new role, her laughter returning, her pain softened by the joy of seeing others heal. Dr. Carter found herself giving talks across the state, her insights on trauma and healing sought by therapists, teachers, and even law enforcement. One afternoon, as the base prepared for a particularly large Heroes and Hounds welcome ceremony, Eric sat outside the clinic with Sable's head in his lap and Buddy curled up close. He watched the new arrivals step off the bus, faces etched with hope and fear, hearts searching for a place to belong. "Remember when you first came back, girl?" Eric murmured, scratching Sable's ears. "You changed everything." Sable looked up at him with those wise amber eyes, and Eric felt the old ache in his chest finally loosen. The sun dipped low, painting the desert in gold. Marines gathered, old friends and new, a patchwork family woven together by the legacy of two dogs who refused to give up. At sunset, as tradition now dictated, everyone gathered at the flagpole. Major Alden read the latest batch of letters sent from across the country, testimonies from people whose lives had been changed, sometimes even saved, by a second chance. Dr. Carter introduced the new pairs, her voice proud and sure. Sam led Buddy in a triumphant lap around the crowd, the puppy now grown into a sturdy young dog who radiated life. As the ceremony ended and the sky deepened to twilight, Eric addressed the group, his voice steady, hopeful. "Sometimes, the ones who save us are the ones we least expect. Sable and Buddy taught me that hope isn't something you find. It's something you build together. Every scar, every setback, every act of kindness becomes a part of that hope. And as long as we have each other, as long as we refuse to give up, there's no wound that can't begin to heal." The crowd fell silent, then erupted in applause, many with tears in their eyes. In that moment, under the wide desert sky, family wasn't just a word or an accident of birth. It was a promise, one made stronger every day by courage, love, and the willingness to start again. That night, as Eric watched Sable and Buddy on watch by the flagpole, fireflies blinking around them, he realized the true legacy they'd left. Not just the stories, not just the program, but the understanding that the bravest thing anyone can do is believe in hope, even when the world gives them every reason not to. He knelt beside Sable, the old dog's breathing steady and calm, Buddy's tail thumping softly on the ground. "Thank you, girl," he whispered, "for saving us all." And in the quiet that followed, with the desert wind whispering through the grass and the stars overhead, Camp Redding felt, for the first time in a long while, like home.